In this video, you will learn the introduction of Chapter 5, National Income Accounting. So before I start to talk about national income accounting, and I want to ask you, how many of you know the GPA? So obviously, everybody should know GPA, which is grade point average, and it is very important for your school life because it is the measurement to measure how well you do in the class or in school. So it's measure your performance. So think about the GPA, and then we want to think about yourself. Let's assume you're the president and you want to know how well the country is performing. So you need to come up with a way to measure the performance, similar like GPA. So to measure a country's performance, and we have very important index is called GDP. So what GDP stands for? And you may not know. So during this whole chapter, actually, we will focus on discussing what is GDP and all other issues related to GDP. So generally speaking, this chapter will introduce national income accounting. So the data generated by national income accounting is used to track the economic's performance, just like the GPA track your performance in school or in a class. And actually, this chapter is very important because this chapter provides a framework on which future chapters will build. So this will be a very fundamental chapter. So every concept we learn from this chapter has to bear in mind. If you cannot, and you're actually going to have trouble in the future chapters. So after you're learning this chapter, and you should be able to know what the GDP measures and what it doesn't. And also you should be able to know the difference between real and nominal GDP and why people need to create these two different kinds of GDP. And we will explain in the later videos. And also you should be able to know why aggregate income should equal to the aggregate output. And then lastly, after you finish this chapter, you should be able to know the major sub-measures of the output and income. So first of all, why the national income accounting is so important. So let's think about if you get fever, and then if you feel you will get fever, and what you will do. Yes, you'll pull out the thermometer and put it in your mouth. So try to see what's the temperature you are. So if you're over 104 and you know you're having fever. So the same problem facing the government. So when 1930s, so if you know the history of American history, you know the American actually is expressing the Great Depression. And so people can feel the problem in the economy, such as people cannot find the jobs, people's money get less valuable, and the farmers cannot sell their produce, and all have the problems. But nobody know how bad the problem is, or they'll get better or get worse. So in order for government to understand whether economy good or bad, if it's bad, they want to come up with a solution to solve the problem. The number one thing they need to think about is how can we measure the economy. So that's why during the 1930s, we have a great economist called Simon Kuznets. And also he worked with the United States Department of Commerce and to came out idea to how to measure how well the performance of the U.S. economy. So that is called the national income accounting. So this is a measurement of the aggregate economic activity, particularly national income and its components. And when Simon and the U.S. Department of Commerce, when they are discussing, try to find a way to measure the national income accounting, and they are thinking, so for this measurement, it has to be able to answer in the following questions, such as how much output is being produced and what is being used for, and also how much income is being generated in the marketplace, and what's happening to prices and wages. So all those questions has to be able to answer by one measurement. So that is what we're going to learn in the next video. Is one of the great invention is called GDP. It is an index to measure the performance of one economy. So nowadays, not the U.S. using GDP to measure the performance of one country, but also the rest of the country. So the UN, United Nations, actually have the one web page just directly reporting the GDP for different countries. So having the GDP is not only allow US to understand how well one economy how well the economy is doing, but also will allow a cross-country comparison. So the creation of the GDP definitely help the government to find the problem and to tackle the problems. So in next video, and we will spend a lot of time to look at GDP and what's the definition for GDP and what are differences between GDP and the GNP, and also how can we using GDP to do the international comparison. And mostly we also need to understand GDP per capita and the differences between nominal and real GDP.